everybody. Will Nuelle. Very nice to be here today and super excited about it. I lead the venture investing practice at Galaxy Digital. I could spend the entire duration of the talk talking about all the things Galaxy does, but suffice it to say, we run an asset management, a trading business, a lending business, and a mining business. My job is to identify really interesting business models that are successful in our industry. And I want to talk to you today ultimately about block space, and particularly the revenues associated with block space as a business model, the cost to produce that block space, and the future scale of that block space as a business model. As a history lesson, in 1995, PCs were growing on their S-curve and shipping had cumulatively shipped about 200 million units to that point. Insight Partners, which is a firm that now has 90 billion of AUM, was identified that moment and was built around the business model of software, selling software to these new PC units that had been introduced into the market. And Insight didn't do this because they were techie. They were financial analysts who identified that software has a high propensity for recurring revenue, high gross margins, and revenue that scales super linearly with the cost. It's one of the best business models in the world, as they say. And one of the unique points here is new technologies create new business model innovation. So what are those business models in crypto that are actually successful and that have recurring, reliable product market fit? One is software businesses, as we just mentioned, businesses like Fireblocks and Chainalysis, where people pay to use the software in a fashion that's adjacent to the space. The second is exchanges. Crypto's propensity to financialize everything, all the way down to memes, means that there are reliably high volumes and high fees for exchanges, making it an exciting business model for crypto. The third is stablecoins. That's a $115 billion market cap business with 4% net interest margins. It's a really successful high product market fit business. The last is block space, which I think is the least well understood. But there's real reliable product market fit in selling block space to consumers on a per operation basis. So what is block space? Well, every 12 seconds, Ethereum produces a capacity to run programs in that basically computer environment, right? And auctions off to the consumer the right to use that compute space, right? And so one of the interesting questions you can ask is, what do people actually pay to use that block space? What do people pay for this product that is put out into the market? It's kind of unintuitive, right? It's something we think about as is users paying for block space or applications paying for, but really it's the fundamental base level user who's paying for that capacity, right? And Ethereum is kind of lapping the field when it comes to what users are actually willing to pay to access that commodity product, right? Ethereum users are paying on average $10 million a day to access that block space, while our users of Arbitrum and Optimism and Binance are paying on the order of $100,000 a day to use that block space. So the one question you have to ask is, what's accounting for those differences? We think and talk a lot at Galaxy about the propensity of block space and venues to produce network effects. And one of the fundamental reasons is because Ethereum has been able to generate a network effect around its applications deployed, developers, users, capital, and liquidity in applications. And one of the reasons it's able to generate these sustainably higher economic surplus. So if we look at block space as a product that's been sold over the last 4 years, one thing we notice is in 2022, it was in aggregate across these 6 block space venues, excluding Solana here. Solana could be maybe included as a 7th. It sold 594 million in transaction fee revenue in 2020. That went all the way up to 10.9 billion in 2021 in aggregate, and then 4.8 billion in 2022, and 2.8 billion in 2023. That's a cumulative annual growth rate of 48% for the whole market, but obviously tailing off massively since 2021. One note is Ethereum is 88 to 90% of the block space market by actual transaction fees paid. And so that's an interesting fact. It's really owning the market. But you can see in 2022, for example, the alternate L1 rotation, where you see Polygon and Avalanche growing 100% year over year on transaction fee revenue. And likewise in 2023, the rotation to Arbitrum and Optimism, a kind of L2 rotation growing at 140% plus per year. And another analysis is, what does the market actually pay on a market cap basis for this block space? One unique thing is, the market's really paying, and this is kind of analogous to like a revenue multiple. The market's paying 100 times for Ethereum and over 500 or 600 times to Polygon and Avalanche. Now, one of the notes from our last slide is Ethereum has ultimately fell 40% year over year in transaction fee revenue, whereas these other networks have higher capacity. But I won't be normative about the price the market's willing to pay. It's not my place to say it ultimately. The more interesting question about block space is not the revenue associated with the block space, it's the cost to produce the block space. So this is probably not a table that many have seen. This is my work on putting together an income statement for Ethereum and analyzing the sort of key business model here. The top line, just to walk you through it, is the transactions per month. For Ethereum, this hovers around 30 million transactions per month. The field below is transactions per second. So it also, as I said, hovers around 15 transactions per second. And that's a fundamental capacity constraint, right? And if you multiply the average transaction fee paid over the course of a month times the transactions in that month, you get the gross transactional revenue for that particular block space in that month. The more interesting question is, what does it cost Ethereum to produce this effect, right? You could see in the cost of goods sold section, that's the direct cost to create the block space, to produce the block space. That's two things: a tip to miners, right? So, or to validators now, that comes out of the transaction fee revenues, and that's basically stock-based compensation in the form of ETH tokens, in the form of a block reward to validators. Now, the fundamental takeaway is Ethereum's producing a gross margin of about 34%, right? So validators take away about 66% of the total gross transaction fee revenue for block space. Now, one of the other constitutive features of Ethereum block space is there's no OpEx, right? There's no OpEx associated with Ethereum block space. It's a coordinated network mechanism. So all of the costs incurred to produce this block space are direct costs, not indirect costs, coordinated by a central organization. Contrast that with Arbitrum, and why I think Arbitrum and other L2 rollups are such interesting business model. If you look at April, you could see Arbitrum's transaction fees, total transaction fees, was 45 million, 50% higher than Ethereum's transaction fees. L2s are fundamentally unbounded in their scale to process transactions. And really, it's based on demand-side interest in Arbitrum. The other keynote with Arbitrum and other L2 rollups, Arbitrum being an example, is they're buying consensus, or they're buying data availability from an L1 in the form of call data, right? That's a cost of goods sold versus the transaction or the block space that they're presenting to their end consumers. Now, all in, that equals a gross profit over the last 9 months of about 25%. So that's a pretty low gross margin, but likewise benefits from the same feature as Ethereum, which is that there's no real OpEx built in. So again, another interesting business model: low gross margin, but high scale. So what are the constitutive features of block space as a business and as a product being sold to the market? Strong net income margins produced by that zero OpEx effect that I mentioned. There's no central business coordinating all these things to produce the product. It's as if all the Uber drivers in the world were running the software on their own phone to route everybody's route, right? That's fundamentally what we're talking about here. The other feature is that there's this business model is prone to network effects, right? Strong network effect-based business with sustainably higher economic, sort of recurring economics, for good block spaces with a network effect. The downsides are high cyclicality. Unlike software businesses, which have high recurring revenue, Crypto, the demand for crypto block space is highly correlated to the market and to volatility in the market, which is a downside to the business model. And I'll leave you with one final kind of fact, which goes back to the purpose of this talk, which is about the business model of rollups. Rollups are ultimately going to bring the cost of goods sold. That cost of call data is coming down substantially over the coming year. And we could see 2 to 5x improvements on the cost of call data bought by L2s, which increase the gross margin from something like 25% to up to 70 or 80% plus, which is a really interesting business model when you think about high scale, high gross margin businesses with extremely low or zero OpEx. Makes, in our view at Galaxy, Layer 2 is one of the most mispriced and interesting business models that exists on the market today. So that's it, guys. Thank you.